Hello, my friend. If you are in Canada and you're listening on the release date, happy Canada Day! So awesome. Thank you so much for listening. If you're in the US, well, I will wish you your happy Independence Day coming soon. And today is Celebrity Chat Day, which is such an awesome day, as you know. This week is Drasko, and I was actually on his podcast recently. So we're doing, musical chairs. I was on his podcast, he's on my podcast, but today we are talking about he's from his coaching company is called UpLevelMind, and we're talking about how when it seems like things aren't working, sometimes it's just us getting in our own way. Have a listen. Don't forget to leave me a comment if you can. Take care, my friends. I hope you have an amazing day. Hi, my friends. Welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast, and this is Heather, and I am super excited that you're here. You are going to hear some tips and some tricks and some ideas to help you live your happiest and healthiest self. I call it Back to Me because when you are taking care of yourself, back to me, then you can take better care of others, and we can all make the world a better place. This is Wellness Your Way, and I am super happy that you're here. Excellent. Hello, my friend. How are you doing? I hope you're having an amazing day. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast. And you know already it's one of my favorite days because it is my celebrity chat day. And today, my super awesome celebrity is Drasko Raicevic, right?
I mean, you're always a high-level celebrity when people don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Right.
So I will take it. That is fine with me.
Did I not get it right?
No, you got it right. I'm just,
Okay.
I'm more just playing at the fact that I don't think I've ever been called a celebrity before. So I'm just rolling with that.
Well, in my mind, everyone who comes is a celebrity because I always learn something from them. And in my mind, if you taught me something, you're a celebrity in my world, right? So and I like the fact that you're a one name now. You're like Cher, no, just Drasko.
Cool. I'm okay with that too. This is,
That puts you in
I
the
mean,
stratosphere of
listen, flattery
celebrity,
will get you places. So
right?
I'm okay to to be flattered as much as you want. So that's fine with me.
So your company is UpLevelMind, and people will think, "What is that?" So I'm curious. Well, I'll start with how did you pick the name? I think I know how, but tell me about how you picked the name and what you do with it.
Fair enough. So I guess I'll give the context of the name and then I'll explain how I got the name because it's much unsexier than it actually sounds. So I owned a brick and mortar weight loss center for 10 years and grew that to hundreds of clients, 4 staff, and right before the pandemic, that whole business imploded. And it imploded because of my emotional, essentially constipation, emotional blind spots, emotional immaturity, where I began to make a lot of business decisions that had more scaling type implications, meaning like the bigger you grow, kind of the bigger you can fall. And I started making all these decisions to what in hindsight amounted to try and find my own significance in the business, try and prove that I'm good enough by having a successful gym, not really even asking myself, do I want to continue having a gym and training people in this way, trying to fix people in the hopes that I could fix myself by proxy, basically using the business as a way to make myself whole, which, surprise, surprise, doesn't actually work. So that business crashed right before the pandemic. I couldn't even blame it on the pandemic, you know?
Too bad.
I know. I was 2 months off. Everything kind of closed down in January, and then March, everything started. So I had spent the last 3 years because things started to unravel, even before like the final closing, really looking into myself and kind of like, well, why are all of these patterns actually happening? And because I had to pivot during that time and figure out like, how do I avoid this again? What do I do now? Like I've spent 10 years building this business and it led to nothing but debt. What do I do now? I started going into essentially internet marketing because I grew my gym in a non-typical way. Like most gyms are grown through community and referrals. I grew mine through advertising and funnels and systems. And all
That
the
is
like
unusual
typical
for a gym, right?
100%, right? So I grew it that way. So I started doing those things like creating funnels, creating ads for other coaches, basically started building up like what would have become like an agency. Like I started having clients on retainer and all of that, but realized like, again, I was not happy doing this work, right? What I was really happy was talking to the entrepreneur and helping the human behind the entrepreneur evolve so that the marketing tactics could actually yield them the results that they were looking for. So when I got honest with that, I began to transition out of like the agency type work. And initially I tried to combine like the marketing kind of 101 with the mindset kind of life coaching work that I was like myself growing. And then also through the interactions I was having with these business owners. And that became 10K norm, which was like kind of like normalized 10K months for kind of earlier stage entrepreneurs. And then at some point as that began to kind of like I was selling like marketing courses and things like that, I was like, again, I'm starting to again trying to like use the proxy of the business to like actually do the work that's fulfilling for me. I need to get honest with myself. I'm going to not make the same mistake and really just go into like I am about involving the human behind the entrepreneur so they can get over their business ceilings by really looking at themselves and up leveling the mind and the aspects of themselves that are actually the bottleneck and the blind spot in the business. So that was the idea of like what it is that I wanted to do. And I'm a big fan of like giving it a name that kind of encapsulates everything. So UpLevelMind just came about the fact that that domain name was available and it coincided with what it is that I wanted to do. So
That's
to be
awesome.
fair, that's where the name came from, but the story is much more relevant. So
The story is way better than that. Oh, that was the domain that was available.
correct.
But I
Yeah.
totally get it. Being an entrepreneur, trying to find a business and a domain name that makes sense to you, right? And I find it interesting, like because I started with the business coaching aspect as well, and maybe you find this true, and I feel like having had a conversation with you, I know you totally find this true that business problems, all business coaching ends up evolving into life coaching, right? Especially for entrepreneurs because you're not working for someone. I mean, we had that conversation. What is it? It's you that's causing the problems, right? And so now do you still see yourself as a business coach, even though really what you're doing is kind of
I
helping?
don't see myself as a business coach. I see myself as a human coach that works with people that when they get out of their own way, their business naturally evolves as a result of their evolution. So can I dive into business topics? Yeah, 110%. And we definitely do that in the coaching, but it's usually the catalyst for something that isn't being addressed. So just to kind of add to what you mentioned before, and if anybody's interested, so I have a freebie on this on my website. So if you go to uplevelmind.com, I have a whole masterclass about this topic where it's
I
like, are
took
my,
that master class. It's
yeah,
good. Everybody should go do it.
perfect. So the basic premise there, and because I wanted to piggyback off of what you said is like because you've said okay like ultimately all the problems come down to you as the business owner. Yes, fundamentally they do, but it's not the full picture, right? So I always liken it to, if you're asking yourself the question like, are my business problems actually me problems? I take a look at that as this model of like a ladder, right? So on one side of the ladder, what you have is your being, right? Like who are you, and like day to day, like who are you being day to day? Okay, that part is definitely relevant, right? The other side of that ladder is kind of like your character, right? Like your patterns, the behaviors that you do all of the time. Both of those will not stand together. Like they will not get you the business that you need unless you connect that ladder with the steps in between, which is actually the skills, right? So you do need a certain level of skill in order to actually go about and make the business that you want. I like that whole like visual, because it allows you to see like, okay, if I have a lot of skills, but my being, like my idea, my beliefs about who I am is the limiting factor, that I can only climb as high up the ladder as that rail goes. Like I can't, it takes all three
There's
together
nothing
for
to
it to
hold it
work.
up.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that I just want to highlight that because I've certainly been in that trap where like, but I'm doing all this personal development work. Why isn't this stuff happening?
But I'm so smart. Why isn't this working?
Correct. So at some point you do have to combine all three together. And it is, either a lot of self-awareness to see exactly which one you need, and or that plus having to be facilitated by a coach. That's really where I always say it's very hard to see the building if you're standing on the balcony, right? Like you need that zoomed out view to see exactly where do I got to navigate and how do I got to navigate it. So
yeah, I liked that analogy when we had our conversation, that you said, you can't see where you are if you're standing on the inside. I heard somebody describe it recently as you're in a box and the instructions to get out of the box are on the outside of the box, but you have to get out of the box to see the instructions. So you
yeah,
can't get out of the box. So
yeah,
you need
that
someone
there's
outside you to read the instructions to you.
correct.
Which is awesome. Um, which is why we're coaches. I mean, it's why you're like, I can read the instructions for you. I can see what you can't see and maybe help you along the way. And so the two sides of the ladder are the being, and what's the other side? You refer to it again as the
So it's like the character, right? So this is my
character.
pattern, that's my habits, that's like all of the things I tend to do every single day. Whereas my being is like, what are my thoughts? What's the paradigms that I'm looking at the world through? What are my beliefs?
Right.
That's who I'm being when I am doing the character aspects of it.
And something I hear quite regularly now in the space is the be, do, have model, which I think yours reminds me of it, but in a different way. Have you heard any references to that? You must have,
Yes, I
right?
definitely have. And yeah, I mean, I would say one, like the be do have, that's more of like what's my state of being, what's my consciousness that I'm looking at this particular problem at. I look at the latter as more discerning what is the limiting factor to like get out of the way, because a lot of the times like we so much focus on how do I press the gas and go and do more, when the reality is you could press the gas, but if you still have things weighing you down, you're only going to like make that worse, right?
Right.
So getting like either plugging the holes or taking the brakes off is actually a much more efficient way to go forward, to go faster, than it is to focus on the gas first. I'm not at all against that, but it's like, imagine filling the bucket while you have holes. Well, if you fill the holes first, then you fill the bucket, the rate at which you fill the bucket increases exponentially. So
And
that's always what I'm a fan of.
I had this image of a car spinning its wheels, like, because you still got the emergency brake on or whatever, or you're still tied down, spinning its wheels, and that you end up digging the ruts of your less than effective behaviors deeper and deeper into your habits. It's like you just keep making it worse and worse and worse by trying to go harder, right?
100%.
So good. True. And I mean, I'm totally admit it. I need to learn all these things myself on an ongoing basis. I am like you, always working on myself. And then something comes along and goes, oh my God, really? I didn't realize I was doing that. And it's usually comes from a coach outside of me, because it's hard to see for yourself what's going on. Do you find that, because I know you've talked to lots of coaches anyway. Do you find that or maybe I'm just assuming that because that's who you talk to on your podcast a lot, but do you find there's a commonality among business owners of what their way of being is, that's, or care? Yeah, I'm going to think it's probably a way of being thing, but I'm assuming good and bad sometimes. Like, is there a commonality that you see where people get themselves stuck the most?
Yeah, there definitely is lots of commonalities. So the first one is for like coming to peace with like at what point do I keep adding like the rungs of the ladder before I realize that might not actually be the issue. So in this instance, in that model, the rungs of the ladder are the skills.
Right.
We default to, because especially in the marketing, it's the sexier thing to do, right? Like, let me make $10,000 months. Let me get to six figures in 6 months. Like whatever the promise is, the business is how I get there, and then that's going to solve all of my issues. Again, I agree to that to a particular degree, and obviously my opinion is biased. However, the more I speak to people, the more I break this down with clients, more often than not, they know exactly what they need to do to at least get 50% of the way towards their goal. Right. So it's
Their
like
financial goal, you mean? Or
so their
yeah.
financial goal, their business revenue goal, like whatever that is defined as. So the number one thing is like, if you are finding that you are doing more of the strategy thing, I'm doing the next tactic, I'm going to the next, social media platform, I'm
Taking the next
hiring,
course.
taking the next course, joining the next mastermind, but my results aren't really changing that much, then maybe what you lack is not a skill gap. Maybe it's that being character gap. So that's like the number one, because usually when I start to probe, there ends up being something else. So let's just take visibility, for example, because visibility is something that is kind of like a must to overcome to be an online entrepreneur, right? So like in early stage entrepreneurship, it's usually like visibility. Like I'm just afraid to be visible. Like I just don't even know what it's like to be myself out in front of the world where I have to be judged. Will there be haters? Will there be all those things? So, for your first initial kind of hit in business, you're going to have to overcome visibility. No amount of learning about the Instagram algorithm, no amount of learning how to construct the best, Instagram post, no amount of learning how to best talk about your thing, which platform to go into, which hashtags to use, is ever going to help you actually overcome the visibility issues. Okay.
And I find like so many people spin their wheels on trying to analyze exactly how to be seen that they're avoiding being seen at all,
Correct. Right. Or
right?
it's like to the degree that I'm seen, like I will, and this is certainly something true of myself as well. Like I'm more comfortable showing up as smart sounding, like to be like technically correct, or like to talk about concepts, than I am about like showing up in a way that's just authentically expressing, say, something emotional, right? And that's my thing. And because I bring people on to like share these things, that's why I'm taking my own medicine and sharing the same thing
Right.
on
Yeah.
my own,
You
right?
do that to people on your podcast, but you're like, no, I'm the smart guy.
Correct, right? That's why I wanted to bring that in, is like, okay, I try to walk my own talk as much as possible, right?
That's groovy. I won't make you cry or anything, I promise.
It's only fair. People have cried on my podcast, so if it goes there, I'm willing to go there. So no matter.
We're not that stressful here. We're pretty chill.
That's all good. But yeah, so it's like stuff like that, right? Like it's usually the issue is not really the issue, right? The issue is, did something happen while you were growing up that stunted your expression, that made it feel for you to feel unsafe in that expression? Those are
Teenage
all
years,
of the
that's what
things,
happened. High
right?
school.
Yeah.
Everybody got traumatized in high school.
High school, like parents, right? Like did I only get love when I got good marks, versus like when I created that thing with Legos, they just kind of like, oh yeah, that's nice, and they moved on with their day. Like, did I interpret that as like my expression doesn't matter?
Right,
Right.
right,
Those are
totally.
going to be the underlying narratives, the underlying paradigms that are going to be running the show as you go and try to be like visible online. Not to mention, sometimes like we don't actually have explicit memories like that. Sometimes they're just implicit, meaning like I just have this paralyzing, like anxious, panicky type feeling every time I'm supposed to go online. Like, yes, a part of that is just like putting in the reps to get over that. But a big part of that is like when you had that initial memory of like my expression doesn't matter with my parents, you remember that not at the level of your like functional adult brain, you remember that at the level of your like neurological body. So it's a somatic problem that you're unlikely to solve using intellectual tools. So that's also why like I incorporate a much broader tool set to working with clients, where it's like you got to know how to self-regulate before we can even work on the actual narratives. Then it's the combination of self-regulating, working on the narrative, and exercising the courage to show up in this way that's ultimately going to get you not to just do the activities for the sake of doing them, but to actually transcend it, where like this becomes fun to show up and be empowered in visibility. So that's just an example of like the
And it
visibility
is,
issue.
like, I totally get it. It is hard in the beginning to stand up in front of, in your mind, the whole world is watching. Although, by the way, everybody in the beginning nobody's watching,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's when you can actually start to practice and just flex your muscles a little bit. So when you're helping people self-regulate, are you using like NLP type practices or subconscious reprogramming, or I've seen lots of
No, I don't.
tactics. It's
There is. I got nothing against those, but like I'm not
that's
practiced enough in them to actually like
right.
use them outright. But if that works for you, that works for you. Like I always say, in my coaching, like if doing headstands for 30 minutes every day gets you the result that you want, I'll be the first one to encourage you to do it for 45 minutes, right? Like I'm agnostic on the actual tool that helps. For me, what I actually like focus on is, so there's like two components, where there's like the passive component, which is like I'm there with a client and I'm getting them to increase their level of tolerance in like imagining, okay, like this is the thing, like building the awareness, like what is it they actually feel in your body, where do you feel it, how do you feel it, and then do you have your own resources? Do you have your own tools to actually self-regulate yourself? Like I'm not going to be there every time you have to go in front of like the camera, right? So for some people, that means they have to upregulate, meaning if my natural way that I learned to cope with these things is to shut down and turtle, we're going to practice things that get you upregulated, right? Movement, like sniffing like peppermint, like essential oils to like upregulate the system, like jumping up and down, dancing. Like that's the kind of stuff you're going to need
Zumba,
if you tend to, yeah, Zumba, whatever it is that works for you, right?
right?
If you're somebody that tends to upregulate, meaning I get way too like antsy, like I'm nervous, like I'm like tapping my arms all the time, I'm fidgety, like I can't stand still, then it'll be like down regulation. Then it's, deeper breathing. Then it's like blankets. Then it's like soothing touches. Like, what is it that you need for that individual? So we practice that passively. And then the active portion of it is, okay, so how do I combine that when it's like showtime in conjunction with like the mental tools and the mental processes that I use to like how do I pick a better narrative that's going to coincide with the result that I actually want in that moment?
Right. And I think a lot of people, and I guess visibility is pretty huge for a lot of entrepreneurs, whether I think not even offline entrepreneurs, sometimes, they'll put up a little sign outside their store and just wait for the floods of people to to notice them. But my brain just turned off for a minute. Oh my gosh. Yep. I have too many ideas coming through my head at one time. Um, Visibility, right. You'll have to
That's
bear
okay.
with
So
me.
yeah, that's okay. The visibility bit, yes, I agree with you 100%, is a big one. And the other part that I could also add to that while the thoughts
Well,
come
my
back into
thoughts try
your
to
head,
reorganize. Yeah.
it's also like, because you had like initially we started this whole conversation by saying, okay, well, what are the trends that you see, right? So
Oh,
another
yeah.
trend that I see is like people will often say, well, how's this coming up again? I thought I had like worked through this, right? Because usually by the time they see me, this is not the first foray into this kind of work, right? And I always talk about like every time you up level, you're going to hit a new level of resistance. So initially visibility was like just overcoming all of those bits about expression. But if you're a more established business owner, visibility then becomes, well, how can I show up authentically? Right? Like, can I
Right.
actually show up that I'm not like the perfect expert? Is that going to harm my brand? If that gets me to lose followers, what's the like, now there's just like more to lose. Like, is that going to take revenue out that I won't be able to pay my team? And then, you know what I mean? So then it's like another level of, now I got to be visible in a different way, that I'm actually human, that people can relate to this brand, that it's not just like a thing outside of me. Um, and I just bring that up because it's like, the
Because
layers
I
will
just
always
forgot what
show
I
up.
was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure, but that was more of a, like
Good segue though.
pass the ball, and then like I'll take care of it, and it's okay, right?
But and it's interesting because we have this idea that we need to be perfect and we need to have every answer. Like everybody has our okay, everybody being everybody, me, myself, and I, everybody. And that, of course, translates into, I think everybody is this way, is that you feel like if you don't have the answers, that you have failed, and people are going to think, "Oh, who are they to even think that?" But I find in reality, the more I say, "I have no idea," the more real you seem and the more relatable you can be. Because I was listening to something recently that said that one of the struggles that John F. Kennedy had in getting elected was he was too perfect. People thought he was too good. I thought,
Mm.
really? Of course, I don't remember him at all, really, but it's interesting to think that if people think you're too good, they can't relate to you and they think you're just too far outside the realm of real life. So it's like, in a way, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot by thinking you have to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, that's always in the sphere of visibility. Something like that always comes up. Like, it's obviously these are generalities, but then it's like, well, what's your individual um thing that comes out in these conversations?
And it does take, like, I don't want to discount people that it's just like, just go do it. It does take a degree of courageousness to just stand up and say, hey, here I am. I'm not so perfect, but maybe I could, you know, whatever your business is, do this, and for you. And um, I feel like that is a muscle you can exercise and get stronger and stronger, and to the point where you realize, oh, it's okay to actually be out there. And even people, if you get trolls or haters, I mean, my tactic is Yahoo! Someone saw me. And
Yep.
then I send them love because it's about them, not me, right? I mean,
100%. Much easier to talk about than to actually experience, but
I hit it.
it's still very true. Yes.
I've exercised that muscle,
Perfect. Yeah. Couldn't agree more with that one.
right? And it is funny, like my coaching clients, the first time they get a negative comment and they are very upset. I just say, well, let's have a celebration. Like, let's go get a glass of champagne or whatever. And like, let's actually toast this person and thank them, because uh, it'll do a couple of things. Like, people won't suddenly turn on you if they're your followers. It's not like you're going to get kicked off the island or put on the ice floe and off you go. You're going to die because you've been kicked out of the tribe. And quite often, if you have followers who really appreciate what you offer, they're going to defend you, right? So it's so interesting to watch how it happens. But we do have this innate fear. For me, it was high school, obviously. I feel like, oh, high school, so much stress, so much judgment. But did we talk about this where no matter what you do, you're judged every moment of every day because that's the way our brains are wired. So if you can kind of be okay with that, you're just like, okay. And you keep going because good or bad, you're being judged either way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if we talked about it, but yeah, I would agree with it. And I think the part that I would add is like no amount of external judgment is ever going to compare to the amount of internal judgment we do anyway. So
So
that's
true.
the part that really we can actually control, and that's the only part that's actually relevant.
Right? Yeah, that is very true. I like the analogy of if you listen to your internal talk. I just remembered what I was thinking of before. I'm writing a word down. See, it eventually comes back. The amount of if you listen to your internal talk, and this kind of it reminds me why this word came back, is an awareness of your internal talk. You need to be aware first of what you're avoiding, which was the visibility question. Like you need to be aware of the sensation that comes, because if you're not aware that there's a sensation that's stopping you from becoming visible, then you just think you're being productive, being busy. But there's an awareness of these of the reactions that you have, and then and the conversations that you're having with yourself. And then would you say that to someone in real life? Like if you said those things to me, would I still have a conversation with you, or would I say, no thanks, see you later? But I think often we ignore for some reason, or it's just like background noise. We don't hear or feel the things going on. What do you think?
Right, like as far as the judgments that we
Yeah,
actually,
on
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah. I mean, I would agree with all that. Yeah, I mean, my interpretation of the judgment is again like if you root it back to what is the source of it, right? So if there's obviously a lot of theories on this, I like the one that basically goes into saying like our judgments are voices that we developed as kids to basically mimic how we got along with and kept our position with our primary caregivers, which generally are going to be some type of parent figures. So they very much mimic kind of that fight, flight, or freeze type response. So you'll have judges that kind of, let's just say, meet three different like body centers, right? Like you'll have the fight type of judge, which is the aggressive, like, no, that's not true, like forget, like it's kind of the voice that tells you like, no, you can't do it, and then you like lash at yourself like, I'm tired of this voice, like F this voice, I'm just gonna like do the thing anyway, like watch me, right? Like that's kind of like that gut reaction. It's like the judge that tried to fight for its own independence. So when we feel like we're attacked, whether by ourselves, etc., like that's usually the voice that it takes this aggressive fight type bit, right? And there's like the heart, which is very much reflective of kind of like the freeze response or the fawn response, where we get along with our primary caregivers by actually diving into feeling bad. Like, yes, I am bad. Yes, like I am like crappy at this. Yes, like it's I'm not good enough. Why? Because oftentimes as children, when we go into that state, that's where we get the love that we're seeking. Like that's where our caregivers kind of melt and they're like, okay, no, like you are good, etc. So I reaffirm my goodness by actually diving into like how bad it is that I actually am, right? So like that's the judge where you get to overcome a lot of the unworthiness bits, right? Whereas the first one is more about calming down and knowing that you have a discernment, you have the ability to make a choice, before the reaction kicks in. Like you can veto that initial trigger response,
Right.
right? And you have the rationalizing judge, which is usually the judge that you find in like corporate environments where like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I'll just do the overtime because I guess it's kind of expected, and I guess I did get this job, so I've only been here for 3 years, maybe at 5 years, like like you just rationalize it away like that way,
I
right?
should be grateful for having a job, even though it sucks. Rationalization.
Correct, right? But that's like the inner judge that basically rationalizes, and again, in kind of where it comes from is when we are denied like our emotions and we are scouted for our emotions, we generally tend to be praised for our intellect, or we find that it is our intellect that allows us to navigate and still maintain the dynamic with our parents, right? So we internalize a lot of these voices through repetition as we grow. And what it ends up coming out as are these judgments that we put towards ourselves, or when we do have other people judge us, we use these to react, right? And really the distinguishing factor is like, are we engaging with it, or do you have that level of awareness, like you mentioned, to step back, observe, and then just be like, okay, where is my full wholeness? Where is the evaluation, the narrative, the fight, the flight? What is going on here? Like, what is my truth in this moment? And obviously that's a very practiced, nuanced thing, but that's just kind of the general way that I look at judgment.
And it's, I guess you could have all three voices. I mean, to some degree,
100%. Yes.
One might be louder than the others. And, it is the awareness, like, is the voice on repeat and you don't even realize that it's just constantly affecting you and stopping you without you checking in to say, who the hell is back there? Like, who gave you the microphone? It's like taking it back. And sometimes people, like, I always make a comparison that coaching is not therapy. We're not trying to solve your childhood issues or previous things that you're trying to solve. It's more of forward looking, like, okay, we acknowledge that there is stuff, but how can we move forward instead of kind of analyzing the past? And I mean, this is a personal opinion that I have. I have nothing against therapists because, they serve a purpose, and I've been to my own versions of therapists, but I don't want to get stuck in the past, right? I want to be forward moving. And maybe this is one of my previous traumas. I have a feeling that if I spend too much time in therapy, I'll just be stuck in the past all the time, right? So
Yep. I would say it's a valid concern, right? Because we oftentimes do indulge in feelings and reaffirming our woundings, right? Like there is a pattern of like just wanting to relive and recycle what happened, because there is actually payoffs to some of these things. Like being a victim, oftentimes there's actually pretty good payoffs. Like you oftentimes do get sympathy, you get support. Maybe you're expecting to get rescued and you're always in relationships where like you're getting rescued. So there's like very real payoffs to sometimes being in these quote unquote self-sabotaging patterns, right? So I agree with you that you definitely do not want to get stuck in the past. My nuance to that is always like, yeah, I agree that we definitely want to move forward and we want to expand and we want to go beyond this 110%. That's always the goal. The reason why I'm always interested in the past and why I do go there and actually do use some therapy tools to the extent that I know how to use them and have seen them applied very well, both in my life and my client's life, is if the past is actually stopping us from moving forward, then it becomes relevant. But yeah, it just to live in the past without this sentiment of like, what is it actually that I want? How can I get back to living from the very real sentiment that I am whole and I'm not broken? And how can I reinforce that and let go of the things from the past that get in the way of that? That's 110% what I want. So for me, it's like whatever tool needs to be in place to get the person to move forward. I'm all for that.
right, yeah. And you can't, I mean, not you can't ignore the things that were in the past. You can't like just paint it over, but it is very much what you said. It's, you just rehashing it over and over. It's like that same spinning kind of tires analogy. You just dig yourself deeper into it. And it is true. I wonder if that's like the heart-centered one where you spend that time there because someone will maybe come in and rescue you. But I don't find those relationships all that helpful if someone's always coming in to rescue you, right? The knight in shining armor. Walt Disney ruined all of us. All the
Yeah, sure
princesses
did.
getting rescued. God, don't even get me started.
100%, yes.
So we have our visibility. Oh my gosh, what was the second one that you were just referred to?
But I think we just went into visit. Like I'd use that as example, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I have.
As I think you were saying visibility was one of the major ones, or is that just the early entrepreneur ones? No, because
No, I was just using
it's
visibility to show like,
okay.
okay, like in early entrepreneurship, it shows up one way, but then we're like, okay, well, why does it show up? Like, again, I thought I went over this. Like, well, it shows up because now you're in a different,
Right.
it's a different context. So now the same wounding gets reflected back to be healed again in
You've
this
hit a new
other.
level.
Correct, right? This is
Right.
why, like I said, like my specialty is in helping people, like entrepreneurs that are at a business ceiling that know all the business strategy. So we've taken that out of the equation. So it must be something else. Then it's diving into, who they are being and what they are doing from these inner patterns that actually become the bottleneck for them to realize and normalize their next revenue milestone. Right. So it's like it pays to evolve yourself because it evolves both the business and what you're capable of achieving.
So true. I mean, I've just recently been working with a leadership model that talks about a pyramid, and it's at the bottom is the leader themselves. If the leader themselves isn't clear and knows what the purpose is and their vision, and if they can't communicate it properly, they can't, like it can't translate upwards into forget their staff. The customers don't understand it either. It's like if you want to be in business, you have to have a clear vision of where you're going.
Correct.
Um, which people I've noticed that people will start businesses with a really lots of excitement and a good idea, and then they don't have their clarity, and then they also they might not have the skills, as you were saying. What do you do? What do you do when people all the pieces are not working? Their vision isn't clear, their being isn't well, their skills aren't there. Like, which rung do you start with? Which part of the ladder do you try to build first?
Well, you start with the most relevant one, right? Like if it's like all of them, then you can build your skill set in parallel to doing this work. And it's
True.
generally the easiest one to like intellectually build, right? At least for most people. Some people, yeah, that can be a challenge if
It
they're like
feels
just
good. You
really
feel like
don't.
you're making progress because you're like, I'm doing something.
Correct, right? Like it's kind of the anchor through which you're going to view the other aspects of yourself, right? Like who you are being while you are executing the business skills. And then life and reality will reflect back to you the level of your being, right? So like the customers you're bringing in, how, peaceful, enthusiastic or happy you feel doing this work. How do you bounce back from setbacks? Like what are other the things that are coming up? Like everything, like for me, everything is always a mirror. So the material for what needs to be worked on is always there. It's always reflected back by the results and the manifestations that we're watching in front of us, because ultimately they're just the lagging reflections of what we were focusing on yesterday. So that always reveals what needs to be addressed right here, right now. And then it's just a matter of, commitment and time to overcome and transcend all of those.
That one is interesting. So it's a lagging reflection of what. So can you give me a concrete example?
Right. So let's just say your business bank account, or the amount of like sales conversations that you actually have today is a lagging reflection of your focus of the past month. So if it's like, okay, I don't have enough sales conversations, like nobody's really talking to me about my things. Okay, that is a reflection of your focus towards developing and having sales conversations. So if you have one sales conversation this month, and you look at your focus over the past month, and it was mostly towards putting out stuff in social media that was like feel good motivational quotes, well, then you got a lot of likes. Like, that's where your focus ended up being. So your results right now are the lagging reflection of where your focus was this past month. So now that becomes the mirror to look at, okay, is it because I have narratives around, I don't want to have, like, I'm scared to put out my prices. I'm scared to ask for my price. I'm scared to look too salesy if I ask for a sale. I'm scared about being judgment, like having judgment come my way or haters come my way if, like, I say, hey, I'm also doing this thing. Do you want to, buy it, or do you want to have a sales conversation with me?
And that almost goes back to the visibility again. There's the visibility of socials. I can post a million memes,
Yeah,
which, yeah, they might get likes, but no action, versus the visibility of, hey, my name is, and I can help you with this.
correct.
It's a very different kind of visibility. And I guess you could be uncomfortable with one or the other or both. And interestingly, like, the mirror can keep carrying forward. So you spend all your time on social, you didn't make calls, so you didn't have many calls, and that'll carry forward to when you look at your bank account and you go, hey, wait a minute.
Correct.
There's not any revenue, which means I didn't have the sales calls, which means I didn't do what I want, those actions that I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just like a business example, but you can like literally apply that to absolutely
You could
anything.
apply that to working out. Like,
Working out, you can apply it to your relationships, right?
right?
Like, why, like, right now in this moment I feel disconnected from my partner. Okay, so if that's a mirror to where my focus was yesterday, what did I do yesterday? Okay, well, I only said the bare minimum to my partner, never expressed what it is that I actually needed. When I had the opportunity to spend time with them, like, I went and I did something else. Okay, so that is all of your focus towards what is now happening, right?
And then finding an interrupt. If it's, especially, like, I was thinking about partners and how many people I see on TikTok just scroll, scroll, scroll. Do you have an interrupt if you have an intention not to do that, but it's a habit, you have a pattern interrupt so you can actually do what you intended, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that definitely, as far as like the tactical behavior aspects, yeah, an interrupt is a good way to get your awareness back to like looking into, okay, well, what is this actually about?
And using I don't, why gets thrown, what's your why gets thrown around a lot these days. So I'm of the personality that if it's really popular and everybody's using it, I don't like to use it. It's my contrarian side of me. But if you know why you're trying to interrupt that pattern, then that could actually help you habitualize it, I guess. Habitualize the interrupt. You
It
think?
can. I'm not exactly sure what it is
So let's
you're
say
asking.
that I actually don't currently, but let's say I had a really bad habit of TikToking,
Hmm.
like going, 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 going. But what I really wanted in my life was to spend more time with my partner. But I found every time there was a blank space in my day, I'd be on TikTok instead of
Hmm.
talking to him. So for me, sometimes pattern interrupts don't work unless there's a reason why I'm trying to, like, a reason behind, other than I want to stop TikToking. I need something past that to break that habit. So if I bring on my pattern interrupt, which is, I don't know what I would use, maybe a timer or something, to say, okay, it's time to stop doing that right now. And I'd say, 5 more minutes, no big deal. But if I'd say, I'm stopping doing it because I I wanted to stop doing this because I wanted to spend time with my partner, then I'd say, oh yeah, that's actually what I meant to be doing. And that helps me, maybe others, I don't know, maybe others can just say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. But having the why am I changing this helps me actually implement the change. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
because you're adding the narrative element to the behavior,
Right.
right? So it's always like it's my thoughts that actually cause my feelings cause me to act in a particular way, and then those actions cause a particular result. So if the result here is I initially don't end up stopping the scrolling, despite the fact that my action was, okay, well, here's like I installed this pattern interrupt, and then my feeling in that moment was like, okay, kind of like it doesn't matter type of feeling, like since I'm
Right.
kind of discounting. My thought is also, whatever, like I'm okay to continue for 5 minutes. It was that thought that caused that particular action. But as soon as I added the narrative of this is important to me because I want to spend time with my partner, now the feeling is, okay, so there's a level of like commitment, there's like a feeling of obligation, that there's a feeling of kind of willpower or motivation that gives me the action that, okay, now I stop, and then I get the result of, well, now I spend time with my partner. So yeah, 100%. And that's that kind of process of, like, if anybody is familiar with the life coach school, it's Brick Steele's the model. She goes into that whole process, and it's one of the tools I use in my coaching. It
What's the
allows you to
person's name?
discern. So Brooke Castile from the life
Oh,
coach
Brooke
school.
Castile. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she popularized that model, and that's something that I use in my coaching as well. But that's what it actually breaks down.
And you can use it for anything that you're trying to change. I mean, I used the TikTok because I've been learning about TikTok and it's been on my mind. But I think about people who, I want to um, change my eating habits or change my health habits. It's the same model would apply, really. I mean, if you keep saying, I'm going to lose X weight or gain X weight or put on this much muscle or do this, it's um, what is one of your habits that you need to change? And when you find yourself in the pattern of that habit, like, can you remember, oh yes, this is why I'm doing this? And if it's a
Yeah.
strong enough reason, if you're not actually all that interested in the reason for doing it, then nothing will change your behaviors, really. I don't think,
100%. Yeah.
right?
Because it's the narrative always goes first to really elicit the action. Even if the narrative isn't something you're aware of, something that you might need to like extract it out of the result and like that mirror. But it very much is tied to the actions that you're taking. That paradigm, it's super important. I would agree with you.
Right. Yeah. So good. So many good things for people to learn.
Yep.
I'm saying that because you know that I am an education skill taking junkie. Although I have installed a pattern interrupt that as soon as I see a course that I think I want to take, I press pause and
Okay.
I
Very
don't make
nice.
a decision for at least a week. And I'm not using their scarcity tactics because I know even all the places who say, you have to sign up by the end of this week. I know that they'll come to me after the end of the week and go, guess what? We've extended it. And then if I really want to take it, then I will. But I'm happy to report I've signed up for no more new courses.
Congratulations. Okay. It's
Good for
working.
me. Good for me. Pat on the back. Pat on the back.
Yeah.
So, yes, all of that is super awesome. And I think it's super helpful. And I'm wondering, um, any final words of wisdom for our friends out here?
I mean, nothing in particular. Like, I'm always good at talking like on like the topics. I think what I needed to say, I've said. If you want to give me an area, I'm more than happy to like provide an insight or
Okay, how
whatever.
about this? If someone wanted to stop their self-sabotage, what would you have them do first? I know it's a huge general umbrella, but
Right. Like,
what pops into your head
I'm glad
first?
you gave me like an easy one to go with. Okay, so the short answer is acceptance first. The little bit longer answer, and I did my own just me doing my own podcast episode on this as opposed to having somebody on where I talk about like self-sabotage is very real, but doesn't actually exist. And this distinction of like, okay, well, what is that actually about? How can something be real but not actually exist? So the consequences of self-sabotage are extremely real, right? Like, let's just say if it's self-sabotage through an action, that has very real consequences. Like the things that need to get done to move you forward, that is like the actions associated with the results that you want, they're not going to get done. You're not going to get the results that you want. That part of self-sabotage, 110% very real. However, self-sabotage only doesn't actually exist. How so? There's nothing in our behavior that actually gets us to work against us, because fundamentally when we look like beyond the behavior, we look a bit deeper, there might not be an intellectual, like logical reason why we do this. Very often there is a very clear emotional reason why we do the particular thing. So things that are rooted in safety, and they have gotten there at the level of our, child brain or like our primal brain, are going to look very different than the things we want from our adult higher self type brain of the things that we want to achieve. So, being afraid of success makes absolutely zero sense. Yet, being afraid of success means it's triggering a part of you that, say, is deathly afraid of taking on more responsibility, because more responsibility means somebody will be disappointed when they realize that I can't take it on. And that's something that I concluded, a while back, etc. That's operating at the level of, let's just say, the subconscious, where just like I have this feeling that whenever I'm at the brink of success, I end up doing something or something happens that I quote unquote self-sabotage. You weren't self-sabotaging success. You were just following a path that is rooted in the wrong conclusion that you're going to find safety in not having too much responsibility. So I bring up all these examples to really illustrate that, like, yes, self-sabotage or consequences are very real, but if you begin to look at it from the perspective that all behaviors on some level are need fulfilling, accepting the pattern and beginning to look at, well, what need is actually needing to be filled here or is being filled here by the seemingly self-sabotaging pattern, it allows you to accept that without the charge, without the additional judgment, without the additional narratives. So you can begin to look at it more objectively, and through acceptance, create the space to actually move forward and begin to, install and create new habits that are aligned with the things that you want, that are aligned with your higher self understanding of the world and the desires that you have, and then letting go of all these things that create the real consequences of what we call self-sabotage.
Whoa. That's a good final thought, actually.
There you go. A little bit longer than a final thought, but
who cares? Gold star for you. In all the show notes and everywhere is your contact information. So for sure, friends, go and check out the masterclass because it's pretty awesome. I think you sent me the link for that. If you didn't, I'll make sure it's in there. And I want to thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me and sharing your knowledge and all of your experience. And I really appreciate it. That was awesome.
You're very welcome. And thank you for having me on.
Amazing. You have a good day. And then all of you people out there too, have an amazing day. Take care.
Hi, my friend. Thanks so much for listening to this entire podcast. If you found it useful and you're like me and you like helping others, please feel free to share this. Just give it a like, give it a comment. If you found something useful in it, there's a chance that someone else will find something useful as well. Also, if you have any questions at all, I can absolutely help, and I would love to help. You can email me at heather@prosperityflowcoaching.com. If you want more of this awesome content, you can follow me on Instagram, Heather Stewart Coaching. You can follow me on Facebook, Prosperity Flow Coaching. And I have a personal request. I want to help as many people as I can with these podcasts. And if you could give me a review, hopefully a good one, if you could share, if you could send this out into the world, I would truly appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope that you find your way to wellness by getting back to me. Take care, my friend.